here with Hadley Engelhardt. I'm your friend Matt, and we appreciate you guys spending your time with us. We drop every Friday. You can subscribe to the pod wherever it is you get your favorite pods, doing the sports business thing as we do each and every week. We're going to have Eric Poms joining us coming up. He's the executive director of the Orange Bowl Committee. We'll find out about their process, how the college football playoff expansion has changed all of that. So we'll talk about it coming up. Hadley, I assume you had a great Thanksgiving, so we won't spend too much time because you look svelte. So you did well.
I did. Thank you. Hopefully you did too.
All right, so we have a lot of ground to cover here. Now, speaking of the college football playoff, the penultimate college football playoff rankings came out this week, and as this drops on Friday, we record on Wednesday, so it happened yesterday. I think what we're seeing now is a setup. Hadley, we're getting the setup because part of this is the college football angle. The part of it is the business side. And I think we have to remind the viewers and the listeners, this is a TV show at the end of the day. And when I saw the rankings come out and I saw Alabama firmly in the top 12, it reminded me once again, all is fair in love and business.
Yeah, I don't think anything's surprising to the people in the business that Alabama's in the top 12. Now, that could change depending on what happens in these conference tournaments and these playoff games. But I think, listen, everyone's got their argument on their wins and losses and who they played against. But Alabama's Alabama. And let's not forget that. And I think that when it comes to the business side of it, the networks, the viewership, the want to see Alabama being part of this, I think nationally it makes sense. And you're going to hear teams and bicker and complain about that they lost to this team and did this, but the SEC is a different animal. And
it's the brand of it, right? So the Alabama brand, whether we agree or disagree with the formula to come up with these 12 teams, when you have similar teams and similar resumes, guess what? Bama's going to get the check over South Carolina or Ole Miss or Miami, because that is one of the brands nationally that brings ratings, that people all have an opinion on. And when you're building a TV show, having Alabama in one of those first-round games where they're going to go on the road, by the way, and have to go to Penn State or go to Ohio State or go to Indiana, it's great drama.
Yeah, and listen, it's in any sport, right? Now, let's not single out college football. I mean, if you take any sport, you take NFL, you take the NBA. I mean, look at the Lakers. What have the Lakers done in recent years? Nothing. But the Lakers are still the Lakers. They're still the brand. LeBron is still LeBron. Therefore, you get the audience. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And I think it was a tough decision. I'm curious to hear what Eric Poms has to say, whether he'll give us insight on that. But at the end of the day, it's good for this college football playoff format, and it's great for this discussion about who belongs in and who doesn't belong in.
All right, I want to talk to you about a couple of three-letter important parts of college football. One is NIL, which we all know has become such a talking point.
Not four-letter, three.
Well, three-letter, yeah. Theirs is pay for play, and NIL, which was not supposed to be that, has become that. Well, the other three-letter that we want to talk about here is the IRS. So the IRS could be coming for NIL collectives starting in 2025. The agency has named specific NIL collectives, which are tax-exempt organizations, as targets for enforcement in 2025. Now, Hadley, it starts here, but I think what we're going to hear is the sort of casualties, both within the collectives and individuals who did not plan for the accounting and the tax part of this, that you're going to have a lot of bills come due, and I don't know if there's going to be money left over to do it with.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I can tell you from personal experience in our working with some college athletes and presenting offers to them and talking about the tax ramifications. And a lot of the schools are doing the education, they're just not implementing it. And so what's going to happen is you're going to deal with these collectives who are trying to hide behind non-for-profits that are going to get the IRS after them. And then more importantly, I think, it's the college athlete or the high school athlete who is going into college that is going to have the IRS. It's not in 2025. It may happen this year. And there may be things going on that we don't know about. But I think it's going to be a problem. And the other thing that people don't realize is you hear of these players, this player from Colorado who's driving this $200,000 car or whatever it is.
Maybach that we saw.
And well, there are tax consequences. And so when you get stuff paid in kind, you still have to pay a tax to that. And so, we deal with that with our clients, even with a Nike and Adidas. When they get product, they think, oh, I'm getting all this product, there's a tax consequence. You have to be prepared for that. So I think this is the tip of the iceberg. We've been educating players for years on this, and a lot of them haven't taken our advice.
I was going to say, some have fought back on the idea of putting something aside when this tax bill comes due.
Correct. A couple of years ago, when this NIL started, we presented to a prospective client an opportunity that was a 6+ figure deal. And the way we wanted to structure it is to put a third of it in escrow, meaning it's their money. Right. It's just protected. So when Uncle Sam comes calling, you have the money to pay it. The deal went south because the player and his other people in his circle were like, no, you want all that money now. And so I don't know what ended up happening, but we're going to hear more of those stories. And it's sort of like, all these guys feel like I'll pay IRS with the next paycheck and the next paycheck. Well, that's great until there isn't a next paycheck. And all of a sudden you're now, fighting for some air and you're drowning. And so it's bad business. And I think it's going to be the tip of the iceberg.
So let's talk about the other side of this. Jay Batt, the Georgia Tech AD, this week, according to Pete Thamel, finalizing a new 5-year deal with more compensation. Jay Batt's first initiative when he took over was, you got to build up the NIL. We've got to build up this kitty of money to make sure the collectives that Georgia Tech has can give us an opportunity to fight fair with the other teams, the other schools. The reason I bring it up with Jay Batt getting this new deal, I heard one AD said, I'm not an AD anymore. I'm a CEO. He goes, I'm running a business now. It's not what it used to. Fundraising has always happened, right? That's been a part of it. Now, it's not fundraising. It's networking with business people. How can you give us the collective endorsement to try to help us with recruiting? It's a whole new ball game for these guys. And if you're not keeping up with the NIL dollars, you're falling way behind.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, doing the NIL doesn't alleviate still the raising money to build new facilities and doing all those other things. So this is an addition. You're exactly right. I mean, that's why you're seeing these new positions of general manager with NCAA football programs, because at the end of the day, it is big business. And I can tell you, whether you're an AD doing a new deal or you're a coach doing an extension or you're interviewing, one of the first questions that the coach asks the team that he may be going to is, before I even consider this job, and you consider me, are you going to be competitive in the NIL market? Now listen, Georgia Tech is never going to be at the level that Georgia is financially to compete in the NIL market, but you have to be in the game, and you got to be able to be smart about it. And Georgia Tech's still going to sell their school. The ACC is still a Power 4 conference. But at the end of the day, if you're not competitive in the NIL market space, you won't be competitive in any space.
All right, coming up, we got a lot to do, including Eric Poms will join us. He is the executive director of the Orange Bowl Committee. We'll talk about their process, how they find their teams, and how the whole college football playoff expansion has changed that. And we'll talk about the business of baseball and how it affects the Braves, because there's another team maybe kind of getting a leg up in that field. We'll do that as we continue with this edition of Deals and Deadlines. All right, as we continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines, the super agent to the stars, Hadley Engelhart, Matt Chernoff with you. I will remind the audience, if you would subscribe, and you can subscribe to the podcast Deals and Deadlines, just search it on any podcast platform, and you can subscribe and have it waiting for you each and every Friday. All right, joining us right now, Eric Poms is the CEO of the Orange Bowl Committee, who's going to have a very busy next couple of days on his hands, like a lot of college football folks, and he's kind enough to join us here on the program. Eric, we appreciate the time. How are you?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here with you guys, and interesting times, and looking forward to talking a little bit about what's to come.
Well, let's talk about that, because the process has changed, quite obviously, like everything else in college football. Certainly with the expansion of the playoff, we know the dynamic looks a little different. What is the biggest change for you and the committee now when it comes to preparation for the bowl game?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the first thing to note is that the original CFP agreement took us through a couple more years. So to get this in place in this current season, all the agreements had to be renegotiated, and that starts with the CFP with their media partner, which is ESPN, and made its way down to all the venues that were going to be contemplated, including at the quarterfinal and semifinal rounds. It would be the 6 bowl games that were part of the CFP framework on a rotating basis for semifinal games, and that was in a 14 model. So we spent a lot of time over the past year working through that, and so now we're here. We're the The bracket's going to be set on Sunday. The biggest difference for us is that, if this was the 14 playoff, on Sunday we'd be learning who was in our semifinal game, either 1 versus 4 or 2 versus 3. But in this model, we're going to see a bracket. And in that bracket, the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl, we both host semifinals this year. So we're looking at the 6 teams that will make its way through a bracket, ultimately 2 of which will be in our respective games. So we won't know who's in our game. We're going to know the 6 possibilities, and we'll be waiting like America to see who emerges from the first round games to the quarterfinal games. So that's a little bit different, but it's exciting. In the previous system, we had a game of relevance only every 3 years when we hosted a semifinal in that 14 model. Now, every year we're going to be looking at a playoff game. So that's exciting.
So, Eric, now that we have these 3 rounds, I'll call it, how do you think financially it's going to affect fans who want to travel to see their team? So in the past, when there was just the one game, obviously all the fans went. Then you had the semifinals and finals. So most fans, if they were super fans and had the wherewithal, they went to both the semifinals, and if their team made it to the championship, they go to that as well. But they knew their destinations that they were going. Do you think this is going to affect the average fan with the ability to go to the quarterfinals, then to the semifinals, and then to the championship game? And then how does that affect you with the Orange Bowl, with the sale of tickets or the viewership and people wanting to be interested at that level?
Yeah, it's a great question, Hadley. And, obviously this is a dramatic change. When you're in a 4-team playoff, you have not just 4 teams, you have 3 games and 2 rounds, right? And now we're looking at a 12-team playoff that has 11 games, that has 4 rounds. And not to mention, a lot of these programs and teams that are vying to get in the 12-team playoff are playing, in their conference championship games, which involves travel. So, here's the reality is there's going to be a buildup like we've never seen in postseason college football, because you've seen it in November. There's so many programs that are alive, and it captivates all corners of the country, to see who's ultimately going to emerge. At the same token, listen, there's disposable income that's in play. It's during the holiday season. And so, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch, even when you're in a first-round game and it's on a campus. As you and I know, Hadley, being graduates from the University of Florida, getting to Gainesville, Florida for a home game is different than going to an Atlantic Falcons playoff game where you're living in Atlanta and you go down the street. In this case, people in the example of Florida, if they were in the playoffs, would be coming from Miami and Fort Lauderdale and Orlando and Tampa and Jacksonville, and many of which would spend, the weekend, in Gainesville. So now we extrapolate into this system that the first round is going to involve some type of travel, albeit it's on campus. There are 4 teams that will get a bye. The 4 highest-ranked conference champions will be there. So they'll be looking at the 3 rounds you mentioned. And, but the counter to that really is the excitement with massive fan bases in a playoff. We see it with World Cup. We see it with the NCAA men's and women's tournament, that there is a build-up. There's going to be a matchups I am very confident will emerge that you typically don't see in a platform where people are going to get excited and saying, I got to be in the building and I have to be there. So we're excited about it. I mean, historically, anytime we had a game of relevance here at the Capital One Orange Bowl, it was, a high demand ticket. So we're pretty confident that it's going to sell really well. We've sold out, the tickets we control. And then, of course, the teams have blocks of tickets. So we'll see how that goes. I know the leadership of the CFP, the commissioners, Notre Dame's athletic director, they're watching this to see, the patterns. But, they're preparing for it. And I think as we get out of the next couple years into the next agreement, which is coming not next year but the year after, the local organizing committees, whether they're bowl games or the first round games on campuses, we're going to handle more tickets locally than we currently are in the current agreement. So it'll be a work in progress, but we're excited about it, and we'll see what happens this Sunday.
So I want you to speculate, and that's what this is going to be, because the future of college football just continues growing in all kinds of different elements, right? NIL and the transfer portal and the playoff.
Sure.
Can you see this staying at 12, or can you see it expanding to 16 in the near future?
Yeah. Well, we're a bowl organization. That's who I work for. That's who I'm representing in this conversation. But it's the commissioners of the conferences. It's Notre Dame's athletic director. They report up into a board of managers, which is the presidents of the universities, and they have representatives that make the final decisions. I know there's a big conversation going on about that. I could see it staying at 12. I could see it expanding to 14. I could see it expanding to 16. It really is going to be interesting to see how it unfolds this year. I know that they will pick up this conversation early 2025. They certainly can address it then. It may go to 2026. They have the luxury of time to work through this, but I do think it's a conversation, and it's about access. It's about creating the right balance, with what the CFP stands for, what the other bowl games. Remember, there's 40 bowl games across this country. If you're a conference commissioner in the SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12, et cetera, and you're looking at this, you want to make sure that it strikes the right balance for the health of the regular season, the health of the postseason, and that's not just the playoff. It's where your other programs will play in postseason. I think they looked at the next 2 years as an opportunity to absorb this, to observe this, and to figure out what's right. There's a difference, really, in many respects, on the business side of this, right? That's one side of the equation. The other is the competitive model and what makes the right sense, and what's fair, to the system. And so, when they created the 12-team playoff, as mentioned earlier, there were 2 years left in the current agreement. This is year one of those 2 years. So they had the luxury of observing 2 years to decide, hey, how do we want to strike the balance here, and to bring into the factors, not just things that are in, the college football postseason, but also factors that are out there that are impacting college football. You mentioned NIL, you mentioned the transfer portal, you mentioned, those things, and I think they're going to take a good look to figure out what makes the most sense.
Yeah, and what's great about this is that, we're hearing it now with Alabama being ranked 11th and all the people out there. When we had 2 teams and we had 4 teams and now we have 12 teams, there's always going to be teams that are at that cusp and deciding, hey, we should be in that top whatever. And this year it's 12 teams. Do you think, and you may not be able to answer this, Eric, do you think they look at not just the scheduling and the conferences, but they're also the committee I'm talking about? Do they look at, the history? Is that part of the equation? Because again, you look at Miami, and you're down there in Miami, and they had a loss at Syracuse to an average team, and Alabama's had losses as well, and they're still in the top 12 and not playing another game, so they may stay in the top 12 depending on what happens in these conference championship games. Do you think their history played a part in the committee deciding to keep them in the top 12?
Yeah, I think there's a great integrity to the people that are on the CFP's team selection committee. When you look, the composition, former coaches, sitting athletic directors, media members or former media members, just highly respected people. I just think that it's hard. when I've been here a long time, when I first got here, it was you had anchor conferences that were in your bowl games. We had the Big 8, and the SEC was at the Sugar, and the Rose had the Big 10 and Pac-10 at the time, and you had the other side that was open. There was a lot of independent schools, and when they created the coalition to the alliance, and it became the BCS, they were two teams, and there was controversy there of which two teams, and it was really accentuated when you had maybe one team that was undefeated and a couple teams that had one loss, and there was a debate on which one-loss team was there. And when they created the CFP created a 4-team model, you started hearing from people in the industry that were very familiar with the NCAA tournament, and they used the terminology bracket creep. And what bracket creep means is when you go to 4-team playoff, then 5 was upset, or 6.
Right.
And now you're at a 12-team and 13 and 14. And to your question earlier, if it goes to 14 or 16, it will be those teams that are on the outside.
Correct.
Looking in. I think it's easier for the public probably to digest, when it's not number 5 being left out, but it's number, 13. It's probably, you can rationalize it a little bit better. But for those teams that are feeling it in their fan bases, it doesn't feel any difference. To your question about history, I think there was an integrity to this. I do. It's debatable. And if you all were in that room, I'm sure you would have that debate. I'm sure you do it on talk shows all the time to say, who's deserving to be in there. And it's a hard call. You don't know going into a season. Sometimes the schedule looks a certain way when you start, and then it turns out that teams that you played and you beat didn't perform to the levels you would have thought. So when it gets to this time of year and the team selection committee's looking at it, all they can do is look at this current time. How many top 25 teams did you beat? Who did you lose to? How did your conference perform? And that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Eric. I mean, you look at University of Miami, they have in their schedule, Florida State, and they're thinking, all right, this is going to be a great win for power rankings, and turn out to not affect them at all. So you're exactly right. What looked good in August doesn't look so great in December.
And to make both of you feel better, the Florida win actually looks better for Miami.
It does. Yeah. To Hadley's point, is that when the schedule started and you looked at Florida, well, let's go back. When they scheduled the game 4 or 5 years ago, I'm sure the University of Miami and the University of Florida looked at each other and said, that's a top 25 win. Mm-hmm. If I can get it, or it's a top 25. If I lose, it's not a bad loss. You just don't know. And, you always look back, hindsight's 20/20, that win that Alabama had over Georgia, I'm not on the team selection committee. It had to resonate, particularly if Georgia, wins the SEC, which they're down to one game. They very well can. So I think that's what happened here. It's hard, but when you're around it, like I have the opportunity to be around it, and you meet the people, and the people. Some of which I know. I mean, these are high integrity people.
Eric, it's a busy time. We know you're caught up in the middle of it. We appreciate you taking some time. Who knows? Maybe Georgia is down at the Orange Bowl here in a couple of weeks, so maybe we'll see. Eric Poms, CEO of the Orange Bowl Committee. We appreciate you spending time with us.
Hey, thanks so much, and love you guys. And Hadley, so proud of you. You're doing great. So,
all right, buddy. Appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Eric. All right, coming up, we will talk about the business of baseball. And one team is doing something that I think the Braves could end up following. Plus, Black Friday was a big success for the NFL. Not a surprise. We'll cover that next. All right, as we continue this episode of Deals and Deadlines, that's Hadley. I'm Matt. I'll remind you, if you're just finding us, thank you. First of all, we appreciate you listening or watching. You can subscribe to the podcast on any audio podcast platform. Just search Deals and Deadlines, or on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel, and some of those places you can watch it. All right, Had, we got some ground to cover here. So I saw yesterday that Blake Snell, the newest member of the Dodgers, will defer $66 million in his 5-year contract. The deferrals are nothing new with the Dodgers. There's also a conditional $10 million club option for 2030. So I saw a list of cash remaining on all these.
2030, by the way, when he's going to be in his 40s,
Correct,
right? So let's be real.
So the cash remaining on these Dodger multi-year deals. Shohei Ohtani has $698 million through 2043 because they deferred so much of it. I know, isn't it great? Mookie Betts has $297 million deferred through 2044. Freddie Freeman has $102 million through 2040, and so that's sort of the theme of what they've done. I love what they've done. It's called circumventing what used to be the NFL salary cap, but in this case, trying to stay below a certain competitive balance tax for baseball. If the player's willing to do it, I think the team loves it for those reasons. And, Hadley, here's the rub. There's a great chance the Dodger ownership sells well before those deferral payments ever come due. So it's a win-win for everybody right now.
Well, it is a win-win, but remember, when it's deferred, it counts toward that year. So what ends up happening is in these latter years when these players are long gone, you're still going to have some serious cap ramifications. And again, unless they change the rules, if they don't, then there's just additional luxury tax. It doesn't matter to the Dodgers, at least with this current ownership. So again, it just puts you over that threshold that much quicker because you're going to be spending many millions of dollars with players that have been long gone from your franchise, whether traded or whatever it may be, but they've stopped playing and you're still paying money. Like we'll use Bonds, for example. That number, that $1 million he gets, Bonilla, excuse me. That's a small number, right? These are real numbers. And so even though the present value of the numbers change and the threshold's going to go up, it's still going to have some sort of an effect. And, again, I don't see a lot of teams still doing this, but because they're always worried about, chief negotiators and general managers will tell you, and Alex on our show Anthopoulos came on. Right. We don't worry about 2024, 2025. We have to start worrying about 27, 28. We got a plan for the future. The Dodgers just don't worry about that. They push things away and they'll deal with it when they have to.
If you see other teams doing it, is an indication that management or ownership could be thinking about selling at some point. Because again, if you're deferring 7 or 10 years down the line and the ownership's like, I might turn this over in 5 years to somebody else, it really does make sense for that current ownership group.
Yeah, and I think it's great, listen, for the players as well, right? You're still getting present value money, and you also have this retirement annuity, if you want to call it. And it works for you. So, again, you're going to see it with the elite players. Again, I don't think your typical free agent is going to get that, but I think when the guys are north of, 3, 4, 5, 600 million now with Soto, you're talking about the ability to get your deal, play where you want to play, and have this annuity, and it's a win-win for the team and the player.
All right, one more baseball thing, and I don't want to talk about the baseball part of it because it's one of the dumbest sort of proposed
I know where you're going.
Right. So the golden at bat thing has been floated now, and Major League Baseball put it out under the context of there's buzz. There's been no buzz, but this is what a league does to see what the pushback or the acceptance of a big rule change. For those who don't know, baseball and Rob Manfred floated the idea of a golden at bat rule, which would allow your best player to be used at any time. You press it once a game. So I'll give you a scenario.
It's going to be like the show where they hit the
Pressure
golden
luck
buzzer or whatever it is. Is that we're going to have this confetti go in the air?
Throw something out. Well, picture this scenario. Here's what I would picture.
The gold bag you throw out.
Right. The Dodgers are in the ninth inning. They're down 4-3. The bases are loaded. Shohei Ohtani is up. He strikes out. Well, Dave Roberts can go, let him do it again. We're going to do right. It's the hokiest thing ever. But there's always a business side to this stuff.
100%.
There's always a talk, a branding, and attention. So from that point of view, if it happens, we'll see. But there is some brand equity that you're getting attention in the middle of December by talking about this.
Yeah, I don't think it's an accident that he brought this possibility on the cusp of the winter owners meetings next week in Dallas. So again, it's about us talking about, just like we talked earlier about the bowls. It's about creating that excitement. Do I see this going into effect? No, I don't see it going into effect. The clock changing the speed of the game, yes, because that was an issue with people wanting to stay up too late to watch games. I think that baseball's in a good place right now. If they clean up the media and the streaming and things like that, so there's no issues out there, they're making money, everybody's happy. This golden bat rule, I think, is a farce, and I don't think it'll ever happen. But again, we're talking about it.
Sure.
So we're talking about Major League Baseball in December, and it's not just contracts, it's about the game. But I don't see it happening beyond this.
Okay, speaking of contracts, we're still on Juan Soto watch. And there have been all kinds of reports. I don't know how much I value these reports, but somebody knows Juan, and somebody knows Juan's people, that there's a deal or at least an announcement that's imminent on where he's going to go. Does baseball get involved in that from a business point of view? In other words, you're the agent, and they say, listen, we'd like you to, we know you have it done. We'd like to announce it here, whether it's baseball's winter meetings or the GM meetings or a time when the NFL is not front and center so they can really own the story. Does that happen?
Yeah, I don't know if the league itself, but they may, because this is such a big signing. But I think that, first of all, I think he's already made his mind up. I mean, there's no doubt, there's no negotiating going on. We're not, fussing over a few $1 million here with Soto. I think he's made his mind up. I think it's just a PR. Because again, these teams now, remember, we're talking about the budgeting. They have to now look at, all right, is he on our board? Is he on our team? That there's a dollar amount, but there's also a roster spot. If he's not, I need to get the next player because I still have a hole there. So I think it's already been done. He may not have told the teams yet because he doesn't want anything to leak out, but I think he's made his mind up. I think with the owners meeting in Dallas, I think it's going to come out. I thought it would have come out sooner, but again, teams have to maneuver all these different pieces to the chessboard, and I think that teams need to know where they stand so they can make the next move, whether they have them or not have them.
All right, let's talk about the NFL. The business of the NFL continues to boom. The NFL's second Black Friday game ever, in this case it was the Chiefs and the Raiders, averaged 13.5 million viewers on Amazon Prime Video. That was a 41% jump from a year ago, so that's obviously a big boon. The other one, and it's funny because the game was just not one that people were going to be excited about, Giants-Cowboys. That was the 4 p.m. window on Thanksgiving, which, for those who don't know, is always the most watched game in the regular season for obvious reasons of the timing of it. Hadley, it did nearly 39 million viewers. It just seems no matter what the NFL does, whether the teams aren't good, the product has not been great this year. The games technically are close, so that can make people believe that the games are good. It continues to go up, and I keep waiting for this glass ceiling, and they just don't seem to hit it.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. Let's break it down, though, into the two different things. The Black Friday game, the numbers were great, but compared to a typical Thursday game, they were below that. So they're not that awesome. However, it was the Chiefs.
Right.
And so anytime you have the Chiefs, I mean, I travel everywhere, and everywhere there are Chiefs fans now. And again, it's part of their success. But I got to tell you, this Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing is real. Mm-hmm. And so anyhow, so you've got that factor. You're also comparing it to last year's Black Friday game between the Dolphins and the Jets. Mm-hmm. Two bad teams that were going nowhere fast. Dolphins weren't terrible, but not a national game. Mm-hmm. So really, it wasn't a fair comparison. When you talk about Thursday, listen, they're not dummies in the PR world. It's a bad game, right? The Cowboys and Giants, two teams that are not very good. But it's the Giants, which, believe it or not, are a national team.
It's a brand. Yep.
And the Cowboys are still, whether you like to say it or not, are America's team from a PR, from a branding perspective. So, again, not a great matchup. But again, they knew where to put the Cowboy game at that second slot on Thursday because they know the Cowboys draw. The better game was the noon game, the 1 o'clock game, with the Lions and the Bears.
Came down to the end. It was fun.
Listen, the coach got fired because of that.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's really had some implications on it. But at the end of the day, they're smart about this. They are the baseline of how every team sport should follow is what the NFL does. And I think Major League Baseball is trying to do this with other things. The NBA is trying to do this with this NBA Cup midseason and just trying to create excitement. But at the end of the day, the NFL is the way it should be done.
Okay, last topic, and not from the football standpoint. I want to talk to you about Kirk Cousins' struggles when it comes to the business part of this, because I keep talking to the listeners, and there's a difference in what we emotional people would bench Kirk Cousins, put in Michael Penix. If it was just about his play, you could say that. The Falcons invested $100+ million. These teams and these people who run them have enormous egos. It's hard to admit a mistake, and I'm not saying they're at the point where it's admitting a mistake, but once you pull the guy that you said, well, he's 2 years. We got him for 2 years at least, and that it's gonna validate what we spent on him, and we'll bring along the backup in Michael Penix slowly. After 12 games, if you were to pull your starter from a business standpoint, everything that would be written and said about the Falcons' decision would be written with, they gave him $100 million. They gave him $100 million. And the egos behind the folks that make these decisions, that factors in. I don't care what anybody says. It's not just about merit. It's about the ego behind the decision.
Yeah, well, let's backtrack. 3 weeks ago, people were praising the signing of Kirk Cousins, right? Because he was the old Kirk Cousins. These last few weeks have not been great. He's made some poor decisions, and it's affected the Falcons' outcome. Why they won't make a change is for other reasons, I think, is number one, they're still leading the division. They're still a playoff-bound team. So they can't win right now. They don't know anything about Penix in a competitive environment, doing this on Sundays. So I think that for a business decision, they know what Kirk Cousins can do. I think they're trying to get over this hump. I think if they get knocked out of the playoffs, they would then make a change, because then it gives them an opportunity to audition Penix on Sunday games when it's real football, when it matters, to know what to do going into next year. And again, financially, they're committed to both of them. So if you have 1A and 1B financially, and you go into next year and you flip it, still the same bottom line number. So I think they're in that position. I didn't agree with the pick to begin with when you made that financial investment in March. But I think they're hedging their bet, and until they're knocked out of the playoffs, I think they're going to stay with Kirk Cousins, and I think that's for other teams as well. I think it's, same thing with Pittsburgh. They're going to stay with Russell Wilson. They got Justin Fields. Until something changes, they're going to stay there. They're committed to them both financially this year.
That's a big Kirk commitment. All right, I will remind you guys, if you would, subscribe to the podcast. Again, search Deals and Deadlines at any podcast platform. We're available on all the above. The new show drops each and every Friday. You can check it out there on the 680 to the Fan YouTube channel as well. Thank you guys for spending your time with us. Thanks to Had. Appreciate it. We'll do it again next week for another episode of Deals and Deadlines.